there's something else that happened that you said at the top of the show that we were going to talk about, and that is this tariffs. Sorry, I can't speak. Wow, the tariffs that the Trump administration is now throwing at Brazil. So tell us what's going on here.
Yeah, I just want to kind of preview this because I do think that it is going to intensify in the coming weeks. Brazil has elections in a couple months. In these elections, Lula da Silva, who's the sitting president in Brazil from the Workers' Party, a renowned progressive leader in the country, will be running against most likely Flávio Bolsonaro, who is considered the moderate Bolsonaro son. Of course, Bolsonaro is currently under house arrest because he incited a coup and participated in a coup attempt against the government of Lula da Silva. And basically, this is going to be a really important election. So that's why I just want to mention this, because Brazil is the largest country in Latin America. It has the largest economy. And it is one of the only, it is going to be one of the only remaining progressive governments in South America. And I say South America, I'm not talking about Central or the Caribbean. After this latest kind of wave of elections, the progressives lost in Colombia, lost in Peru, lost in Chile, lost in Argentina, of course, Milei is there, lost in Ecuador. So Brazil is, again, the largest country in South America and the kind of last bastion of Venezuela is essentially under U.S. vassal state right now because it is being controlled by Marco Rubio under a gun. So in the past year, of course, Lula has policies and positions that are antithetical to the United States. Lula, however, compared to Petro, has taken a bit more of a measured approach when approaching Donald Trump, understanding, rightfully so, that the economies of Brazil and the United States are deeply intertwined. Of course, Brazil's major trading partner is China, but it has a lot of trade with the United States. And so to go in guns blaring would be a mistake because Trump promised, and he followed through on this, that he was going to impose tariffs and review tariff policies on every single country it has relations with. So Brazil actually was one of the hardest hit countries by Trump's so-called reciprocal tariffs. Brazil got 50% tariffs last year not because of whatever trade policy they have, but because their justice wing, their Supreme Court, was pursuing charges against Jair Bolsonaro. And Trump said that Jair Bolsonaro was being treated unfairly, and therefore he was going to impose the 50% tariff. And this was a policy that was advocated for by Jair Bolsonaro's own son, who at that point was a sitting member of Brazil's Congress, Eduardo Bolsonaro, who has now had his mandate cut because he lives in the United States. And all he does is advocate for horrifying policies against his own country. So he advocated for strangling the Brazilian economy with 50% tariffs. And then from that announcement, Brazil and the U.S. engaged in a very intense negotiation. This included members of the private sector in Brazil traveling to the United States and essentially lobbying for a change because Brazil exports a lot of coffee, beef, oranges, and orange juice. Those are the major exports to the United States. But of course, Brazil is a country that has its industrial sector decimated. So exports of raw materials are extremely important to its economy, and beef is a big export of the country. So they have been engaged in these negotiations again for many months. There were some signs that the relationship between Lula and Trump was improving when they saw each other at the UN in New York. Trump said that there was good chemistry between them. Lula visited Trump, but of course, at the same time, the Bolsonaros are negotiating with the Trump administration behind the door because they know that there's a very crucial election happening this fall. Lula, again, knew that at that point, it was not clear that Flávio Bolsonaro was going to be the candidate. Then he came out of the gate being a candidate, and he has essentially attempted to paint himself as Trump's pick. He and his brother have lobbied not only for restrictive tariffs on Brazil, but also to make 2 major Brazilian gangs designated as foreign terrorist organizations. We know what happens when the Trump administration designates gangs in other countries as foreign terrorist organizations. This gives the United States the ability to carry out military operations in other countries. This is exactly how they were able to carry out, again, illegal strikes on boats in the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific. And this is, they want to use this designation to criminalize, to carry out lawfare against members of the Brazilian government and, of course, open the door for military strikes on Brazil. We don't know if there's going to be them, but it does essentially put a lot of scrutiny on people. It tampers with Brazil's ongoing strategy of fighting crime, many other things. So the decision now to impose this 25% tariff is quite concerning because, again, there had been these longstanding negotiations. Lula has already released a statement condemning this and said that it creates a very unfavorable situation for Brazil. Obviously, the Brazilian economy is going to suffer because of this. And I think the only way to read this move is in the context of the elections that are coming up. Of course, Donald Trump is going to start rolling out a series of maneuvers and tactics to give open and covert support for Flávio Bolsonaro, who has already said he will give full access to the United States and essentially whatever they want, whether it's minerals, whether it's better trade policies, whether it's, military bases. Like, he is essentially saying open doors, go for it. This is not the end of the story. There's, of course, many internal dynamics within Brazil that are going to impact this electoral process. But I think it's really important from now that people pay attention to what's happening, because we saw what happened in Colombia. We've seen what's happened in Honduras. And I think they're going to go for this approach. Again, Brazil is a much larger country and it has there's a lot more dynamics to kind of deal with there. But it would be naive to say that they're not going to pursue a similar strategy and that it actually might work. So all eyes on Brazil. And that is what I have for us. And I'm sure we're going to be dealing with it in later episodes.
Yeah, no, can I just add to hearing you break all that down? It's so scary because the U.S. is essentially, with the bombings, like you mentioned, in the Caribbean, and then actually bombing Venezuela. They have normalized the bombing of Latin America. Like, once these things become normalized, the next shocking thing does not shock you as much.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. Like, there is a groundwork being laid to do basically, this is like soft regime change in Brazil. That's what this is about. To try to put the far right back in power, right? To take out the progressives. This is part of Trump's administration is doing basically like an international war on the left. That includes a war on the left at home. They keep saying it. So that's what this is a part of. And when you think about the way they've also tried to use military action in Mexico as well, though Claudia Sheinbaum has been quite smart about the way she's tried to avoid the worst of it. These things are becoming so normal. I would not be surprised if we got to a place where you saw military action in Brazil in the name of fighting crime and gangs and drugs and on and on and on. All to basically take out progressive forces to put in place, like we've seen them interfere in some countries significantly smaller than Brazil and get away with it, with Trump just threatening the idea of economic punishment if the leader he wants in a place like Argentina, for example, isn't chosen in the next election. That stuff matters. People in these countries recognize what it means when the president of the most powerful and destructive country in the world threatens to screw your economy if you don't pick the leader he wants. People know what that means. And then beyond that, again, we watched Venezuela get bombed. I think because the war on Iran has been so insane, we forgot that happened just a few months ago. But these things are becoming normal. This violence is becoming normal in an unprecedented way. So all eyes on Brazil. Thank you so much, Zoe, for explaining all that. And we will absolutely be coming back to cover this story.